areas. Before the government was sworn in. Since then, we've done an immense amount of work, and as a result of that, there have been some significant changes to the assignments. So I'll just run through them, and then we can take questions. I will be Premier, as I think everyone knows, and Minister of Home and Community Affairs. The chief officers in that ministry are Mr. Eric Bush and Ms. Doreen Whitaker. Mr. Bush having responsibility for Home Affairs and Ms. Whitaker for Community Affairs. MLA Alva Saku will be appointed as a councillor, taking responsibility for computer services and e-government. The Honorable Moses Colonel, Deputy Premier, will have the Ministry of District Administration, Tourism and Transport. The Chief Officer in that ministry is Mr. Strand Borden. And MLA Joey Hugh will be appointed as a councillor with responsibility for aspects of tourism. The Honorable Marco Archer is the Minister of Finance and Economic Development. The Chief Officer in that ministry is Mrs. Sonia McLaughlin. The Honorable Wayne Panton, Minister of Financial Services, Commerce and Investment. The Minister of Financial Services, Commerce and the Environment. And the Chief Officer is Dr. Dax Basteo. The Honorable Osborne Borden will be Minister of Health, Sports, Youth and Culture. And the Chief Officer in that ministry is Ms. Jennifer Ahern. Minister Kurt Tibbetts will have the Ministry of Planning, Agriculture, Housing and Infrastructure. And the Chief Officer in that ministry is Mr. Alan Jones. The Honorable Tara Rivers will have the Ministry of Education, Employment and Gender Affairs. The Chief Officer in the ministry is Mrs. Mary Rodriguez, and Mr. Winston Connolly will be appointed as a councillor to assist her with education and employment. So that is the lineup, and those are the assignments. I can now take questions if there are any.
Mr. Premier, could you explain to us what exactly is the Ministry of Home Affairs and what are your responsibilities going to be?
Yes, indeed. Under Home Affairs will fall immigration and responsibility for the budget and support for police, public safety, communications, hazard management, prisons, fire, vehicle and driver's licensing, the Petroleum Inspectorate, community rehabilitation, computer services, and the London office. Under that also will be the following authorities, boards, and committees: the Business Staffing Plan Board, Cayman Bracken Little Cayman Immigration Board, the Caymanian Status and Permanent Residency Board, the Work Permit Board, National Hazard Management Executive, the National Hazard Management Council, and the E-Government Advisory Committee. Most of these subjects have been transferred from what used to be internal and external affairs.
And is that portfolio no longer? And can you explain the significance of transferring these responsibilities that were, I think, held by the deputy governor before to
Right.
an elected minister? Can you go into that?
Well, yes, essentially there's no longer a Department of Internal or portfolio of Internal and External Affairs. You have the deputy governor, who still retains responsibility for a number of areas, and obviously the delegation of the Royal Cayman Islands Police Service can only be very limited in nature because constitutionally the governor cannot delegate responsibility for internal and external affairs, except to the extent that that's already done by the Constitution through the involvement of the National Security Council. So I want to make it quite clear that as the Premier and the Minister with responsibility for aspects of the police, that doesn't involve operational issues, doesn't involve staffing issues, doesn't involve discipline issues. It's solely responsibility for the budget and sort of overall support. Everybody else okay?
Mr. Premier, can I ask you, regarding the chief officers, that there appears to be some chief officers missing, I think, I might be wrong, but also, can we get some clarity on the situation regarding Diana Montoya and Deborah Drummond, who are still, I understand, on the payroll? And whether, I think, I see Leonard Dilbert's missing from that list, and I can't remember, can anybody else? I'm missing, yeah, Ken Jefferson, and I think there might be some others. Can you help us out with what's happening with all the senior civil service staff?
Well, Ken Jefferson, Mr. Jefferson, is the financial secretary. He's not a chief officer. So he's still the financial secretary.
So for clarity, he'll be working still with Mr. Marco Archer?
Yes. Yeah. And who else? Oh, Mr. Dilbert. Mr. Dilbert was called Chief of Staff in the office of the Premier. I have taken a decision not to continue with that post. We still have a lot of work to do to talk about the organizational structure for the office of the Premier and precisely what we need that office to be able to do. So we haven't got there at all yet. So that's all I can say about that at this point. As relates to Ms. Drummond and Ms. Montoya, those are issues that we obviously want to look at, but we haven't turned our attention to that at all. It's been, quite frankly, since Thursday, getting briefings and getting the assignments of subjects to ministers and councillors sorted.
Since nobody else is asking, Mr. Premier, perhaps Minister Archer, do you all have any updates on the budget situation? I mean, we had been told, I think there was an operating surplus expected of something like $51 million by June 30th. Is that still pretty much what the situation is?
What I've been told, that's what stands, yes. Can you hear me now?
Yep, this.
With respect to the surplus, what we've been told is that the projected figures remain.
I'm getting the sense that there hasn't been enough time, or you haven't had the opportunity to delve into your various assigned ministries.
No, we haven't. That's a correct assumption.
All right, so then some of the major issues such as minimum wage, immigration, so on and so forth, have you all been able to talk about how you're going to tackle some of these?
No, not at all. As I said, the entire time has been spent getting briefings and getting the subjects assigned. So we haven't been able to turn attention to anything else. So now that this is done, we can start focusing on some of the other key issues.
When then do you think we might be able to get an update on some of those key issues, as you call them?
I don't know, maybe by the end of the week. We'll see. Certainly by next week sometime. Can let us go now?
I just had one for Mr. Bodden with regards to the national sports policy. I know a couple weeks prior to the election, the former Minister for Sport had released a national sports policy. I was just wondering if you had a chance to look at that and how much, if any of it, will remain intact in that regard. I know the Premier just mentioned you guys hadn't had much time to tackle things, but just a general comment on that policy if you had a chance to see it and if any changes might be imminent.
It is sitting on my desk. That's all I can tell you right now. We've just seen our staff for the first time this morning and did a bit of a tour and met staff, and that's about it. Just talked in large part about the ministry and what's been happening, but in terms of detail, no, not at this stage.
More generally, I'd quite like to ask Ms. Rivers, obviously, as the sort of slightly odd one out. We haven't had any conversations with you since you made your decision and following the West Bay meeting. You seemed very concerned about joining the PPM or joining a front bench of all PPM and you being the only C4C. Can you give us an idea of what it was that you were afraid of? And now that you're with them all, are they turning out to be okay?
Well, thank you for that question. First of all, I just need to clarify a couple of statements. I wasn't afraid, per se, because none of them here seemed that formidable in that respect. But and also, as an independent elected member, it was important for me to make sure that I actually consulted with my constituency before making a decision such as this. And so I just did what I felt was in the best interest of the country to do so, and in particular my constituency, to make sure that they felt a part of the process, because obviously I campaigned on a very different platform, and so it was important for me to make sure that I explained the situation and got their feedback before making a decision such as this.
To that end, then, so as you said, you campaigned on with some different views as opposed to what the PPM did. Something like minimum wage, where you had polarizing points of view. How do you expect to rectify that little gap, bridge the gap, so to speak? I think that's either one of you can answer, the Premier or yourself, Ms. Rivers.
Well, as the Premier indicated, I think we have to have discussions, and I think that's the beauty of the government that we have today. And again, I would give the Premier and his team credit for extending the offer to myself and other independent elected members to form part of the government, either both in cabinet as well as backbench. But I think that those dialogues obviously need to take place, and as you've said, they're important. I mean, there are other pressing issues that the country is facing as well, and so when we're able to actually sit down and have that dialogue to discuss what the pros and the cons are, and then I think we'll come to a determination that will be in the best interest of the country moving forward, given the current economic situation.
Well, the only thing I'd like to add to that is to dispel this myth that somehow because you are a member of a team or a party that everybody necessarily agrees about every single issue. You just have to examine your own families to know that at every level there are disagreements or differences of opinion. But that doesn't mean that you can't have constructive discussion and a views taken that the majority subscribe to, and you move forward on that basis. That's how it works all the time, whether you have a party or whether you have a group of independents working together. You can't run, a country can't run anything, pulling in 5, 6, 7 different directions. So a view has to be taken, and you move forward on that basis. And that's what we expect will happen. Yeah.
I just got one more, Mr. Premier. You mentioned, I said this somewhere earlier in the week or last week, that you were being given briefings on the big issues or the immediate issues facing the country. Without going too much into it, I know you all are still working through everything, but can you tell us what those are? I mean, what are the first 3 or 4 or 5 things that you've got to get taken care of?
Well, really only 2. One is the need for us to produce a budget, pass a budget by the end of this month. So we've had some briefings about that, because authority to spend money expires at the 30th of June. So you got to have a new budget before then. So it'll be an interim budget, as is usually the case following an election.
You're
so
not going to pass a full year budget before 30.
no, we can't. No, we can't. We're good, but not that good. So we've got to get that done. So we've had some briefings about that, and Minister Archer spoke briefly about that situation. And there are challenges, some significant challenges that we'll have to address. I don't want to go into those right now, but there are some significant challenges, and those are some of the things that we need to speak to the UK about very swiftly. And then the other issue, obviously, is the upcoming 3Ts meeting, as it's called in London, which is a run-up to the G8 meeting on the 15th of June. So we've been addressing those issues, and that situation is very fluid. And we've been having discussions. I can say this, we've had a conference call with virtually all of the overseas territories and CD's crown dependencies yesterday to talk about a possible way forward in relation to that. But that is moving very quickly, and I don't want to make any statements which indicate any sort of commitment, except that we're very, very engaged in the process. And as soon as it is possible for me to say something more definitive about that, I will. But those are the things that have been occupying us, in addition to settling the ministries and the various subjects. So it's been a challenging past 3 days, really.
These press briefings, can we look forward to them weekly? Do you know if this is something
I don't,
that's on your agenda?
I don't know that I'm prepared to commit at this stage to weekly press briefings, but what we are prepared to commit to is regular press briefings. We have to see how all of this shakes out. This is all very new at this stage. So
Once again,
we'll see.
Can I just get some clarity on the changes, because there's a pretty obvious change from the health and education that were there any specific reasons, or was it when you all just sat down it just looked better to do it that way, or were there any sort of preferences people decided that they'd rather have something or other?
Well, all of the above, really. We had this presentation done, rationalization of the groupings that was prepared by the public service, which was very, very helpful, because it sought to find synergies between subject areas. That makes life a lot easier for a lot of people, not least of which are the chief officers as well. And also, if you get it right, you reduce the number of chief officers you need to a certain extent. But there was also, so that was important, but it was also important that we got the right people assigned to the right ministries. And so in the end, I mean, health is a critical issue right now, particularly because not just the usual issues, but the development of the Dr. Shedder project is something that's going to require some real care and attention. And so we had to find a minister who was not only able but willing to take this on. And Minister Rivers, in addition, expressed real interest in doing education, and there's a real synergy there between education and employment. And so, having looked at it very carefully, and having had a number of discussions about it, this is how it all shook out in the end. And we think that things are as they should be, really, in terms of the subjects that are together. Perhaps the one anomaly is the combination of financial services and environment. But Minister Panton has a real passion and interest in the environment. And quite frankly, if he didn't take it, I would have had to, and I didn't want any more.
Thank you very much.
Well, I have one final question for Mr. Tibbetts, actually. Mr. Tibbetts, am I correct? Will you be taking on the landfill situation?
No,
Is
that's Minister
Minister Bodden.
Bodden.
Well, I guess it won't be going to Bodden Town then.
You know.
Have you had any chance? Because obviously that's going to be one of your. I mean, with health as well, it's difficult to say what's going to be your biggest. But would you consider that dealing with that situation is going to be a major priority for you? And what ideas have you got so far?
Well, it's certainly going to be a major priority, and I can't forget it because as I look out my window, it's there. Under the last administration, under the last PPM administration, we had a number of solutions to the problem, and they all pointed to on-site remediation along with recycling and waste energy and all that. So that's what we're going to be looking at. We're going to obviously have to sit and talk to all of the stakeholders and make the right moves, but at this point, it's too early for me to say, but I can say it's not going to Bodden Town.
My question is for Minister Rivers. With the last administration, the portfolios of both education and employment were under the same minister. There seemed to be a very heavy focus on education. Didn't appear to have as much on employment. Just wondering if you're going to follow the same manner or what your plans are to deal with both ministries simultaneously.
Thank you for that question, Tammy. Yes, well, actually, both of those ministries, as you said, our subject areas are quite substantial, and I've got the benefit of having a councillor in Mr. Winston Conley, who will be assisting primarily with respect to the area of education to ensure that we do have sufficient coverage and that we can actually move both subject areas simultaneously, moving them forward. And of course, I have also the addition of gender affairs, which I think there is lots of synergies there as well with respect to the areas of employment and education. So I do feel that now having that additional support mechanism in place in terms of Mr. Conley, we will definitely be able to move forward the agendas on both of those fronts in a timely manner.
Particularly because unemployment is quite high right now. We're talking about 1 out of 10 Caymanians is unemployed, 10.5% unemployment rate.
Yeah.
What is your plan to deal with this out of the gate?
Well, one of the things that I campaigned on very heavily was to look at ensuring that the National Workforce Development Agency is able to really take off and do and fulfill the mandate that I believe can be done given the sufficient resources, sufficient emphasis and focus. So from a labor perspective, that's one of the areas that I'll be looking at very closely to see how we can ensure that it's able to really have the impact that we hoped or that I hope that it can have, and obviously not having actually had the opportunity to visit them as yet and to look at what is in place, I'm not able to kind of determine at this stage what needs to be done and what doesn't need to be done, but that definitely is an area that I'll be looking at as a matter of priority.
One final question, which goes to the schools. Obviously, with the financial situation, are we likely to see some movement as far as the new John Gray campus is concerned?
We certainly would like to, but it's too early at this stage for us to say what's possible and what isn't. The government is still not in the strongest of financial positions, and so we have to bear all of that in mind. So I don't think I can say much more about that at this stage, really. It's too early, Wendy. Only 3 days in office.
I've got a question just for Mr. Kirkconnell. You're the only one that hasn't been picked on yet, so I figured I'd let you off the hook.
I was wondering how you was getting.
Yeah. Just your thoughts on the tourism ministry specifically. Obviously, the development of cruise berthing facility is going to be a hot button issue. Whether it's that or something else, can you speak to maybe what you see as the biggest challenge moving forward in terms of that ministry?
Thanks for the question. I believe that we're going to bring an approach to tourism that's holistic and all-encompassing. We understand that tourism is everybody's business, but it starts from the first time you think about bringing people to the Cayman Islands. And we don't want to do this one step at a time. We want to understand that we compete regionally and globally. We want to understand the market that we want to bring here. There's specific areas that we believe we can reach out to. And we know that we have to give a tourist a reason to come here. We have to give them the experience when they get here. We're an island, so they're going to come by ship or they're going to come by plane. We need to improve our ports, and we're very aware of that. But we also want to capitalize on improving these ports and creating jobs as well. And this is, again, a discussion that we have as a group because it overlaps to every minister, some of the very positive things that we can get with this pillar.
And just to follow up, this is a more sort of specific question in terms of tourism. The Kitty Wake was recently awarded by TripAdvisor, a very prestigious award and recognized internationally. I mean, this thing just continues to gain in popularity amongst divers from all over the world. And obviously that's something that attracts a lot of people here. And in speaking with the Cayman Islands Tourism Association in recent days, it seems as though, I don't know that anything's in the works right now, but they're certainly open to the idea of bringing another ship down similar to the Kitty Wake, just based on the success that's had. Is that something that you'd be open to? Again, you know, I know it's very early and everything, but just a general comment on that.
The Kitty Wake is part of the dive infrastructure, and we certainly want to support more infrastructure. When you look at diving and dive tourism, you realize that it's free from movement up and down with the world economy, because the numbers of divers that continued to come to the Cayman Islands didn't drop. If anything, it increased marginally through the depressed time in the United States, which most of our divers come from. So we look at embracing dive tourism as an opportunity in the future. The CITA, along with SITA, has done quite a bit of research in the last 2 years trying to isolate the numbers that actually form the percentage of divers that come. And as we look at part of our overall strategy, divers will be very important in that. Obviously, there's sports tourism, there's medical tourism, there's family tourism. There's all of these components that we want to put together to make sure that we continue to build our industry.
Thank you.
The cruise berthing facility, the previous administration had put out tenders for a business plan. Just wondering if this is something that this administration is going to continue with, and what are your thoughts, your plans where the cruise berthing facility is concerned, seeing that it is a dire need in Georgetown?
Our thought with the cruise berthing facility is that we support it. We support it as what it is, a berth for a cruise ship. We don't support upland development. We support the rebuilding and rebranding of Georgetown itself as a cultural center of this country, and we believe that the cruise pier will only add to that because of the numbers that it will bring. I wish I could tell you more now. There's a briefing for myself at 3 o'clock this afternoon, so the next time we have the press briefing, I'll probably have a little better answer for you. But I will say this, that from what I understand now, the business case is being prepared for government. And the important part of this is that the government itself has taken a decision to have the business case done. This is not a private group that wants to build a pier. The government is taking the decision to look at what is needed for this country, rather than somebody coming and saying that we have a cruise vessel that's going to bring 5,000 people, so we need to build a certain kind of pier for them. So I think that this approach was actually started by the previous administration, and at this point we intend to continue that.
Mr. Premier, you had said communications falls under your ministry as well.
No, that's Minister Tibbetts.
Mr. Tibbetts. Radio Cayman under that umbrella, under the communications umbrella?
Would you like it to be?
If you're willing to take us in, absolutely. Okay, thank you. That's it.
Can I just confirm, are you going to London for the next week or the week after for the G8, pre-G8, Mr. Premier and Mr. Panton?
I think the answer is probably yes.
Okay.
But as I said, it's changing all the time. So the nature of the meeting and all of that is still very much up in the air. So.
I have one more, sorry. I keep thinking of things. Have you had any phone calls from Dart yet?
I've had no official communication. Thank you very much. We may have something else to announce tomorrow, so I'm not sure whether we'll have a press conference or whether we'll simply just advise you. But we may have a significant announcement tomorrow.
Breaking news.